What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt back here with Mike Kaye for the latest episode of the No Huddle Show after a month-long hiatus where our schedule just never lined up. We happened to be on vacation at the other time where the other guy wasn't. It really, I don't even think it would have been possible for us to do a podcast, honestly.
Yeah.
I know our problems are so hard, but...
Life happens, man.
Life does happen.
The highs and the lows. You said it was a hiatus. At times, it was a low-atus, if we can be honest.
And Mike's back.
Yeah. You know what? I'm coming at you strong. Really, there wasn't a lot of news to talk about.
It's crazy. Once the Carson Wentz contract signed, that's kind of the last big thing. And knock on wood, there was no, arrests or... there wasn't even a random Howie Roseman transaction.
Oh, Zack, you just jinxed that.
I knocked on wood. We're good.
Oh man,
we're good.
I don't know how good of wood this is, but this. Oh man.
But the point being, well, it hasn't happened in the last month at least. Now we're ready. We're prepared for it at least. We didn't have to do any emergency podcasts. Which we were prepared to do that if we really had to, but we didn't have to. It was a nice quiet summer for the Eagles.
Yeah,
it's weird.
And I originally thought, just based on Howie's reputation, that there had been more action in previous Julys. I was going to do an article on that. Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, he takes his break because he goes full throttle 11 months out of the year. So
I mean, August is the time where he has done trade. He's traded for Ronald Darby in August. They signed Corey Graham in August that first year and last year, but that was because he was like, I'm going to retire. And they're like, no, we need you to play every snap. But anyway, the point being, they'll make a move or two in August. That happens.
Well, and he and his scouts pay a lot of attention to the preseason
and the waiver wire and all that.
Yeah,
they got DeAndre Carter right before training camp last year. They signed Marcus Wheaton, Kamar Aiken. They'll... Well, and we'll talk about this a little bit later because we don't need to go too deep. But so Tyreek Burwell retired, which is a major loss for the practice squad. He retired, and they released Devin Ross. And a lot of you were like, "Who?"
Hey,
but he released a non-football injury, so something happened off the field. But they have two open roster spots. I'm sure they'll fill them before they report on a week from tomorrow, on Wednesday. The 24th.
Yeah, if you look at last July, on the 25th, they signed Kamar Aiken, and then they signed DeAndre Carter on the 28th. So those were their notable July signings from last year. But, I think when you look at Howie's work rate, like you said, August is where everything kind of picks up. Remember, he traded David Fluellen for Cody Parkey after the there's stuff like that where he'll make a lot of moves in the preseason.
Well, it's guys that will probably get cut by both teams that they swap kind of thing. Those are that's around the league, but Howie does a few of those.
Howie's the master of getting value out of that. I think that's
they always tend to find a guy who becomes, even if he's not a major contributor, a part of the team, special teams or something at this time of the year.
Yeah, and I think... the other thing that kind of was brought to our attention is the Madden ratings.
Yeah. People are riled up.
Yeah, man. Every year.
I feel like they get more, people care more and more as I feel like people in general are playing the game less and less. Because I used to play Madden all the time, and I kind of stopped a few years ago. I just don't enjoy it as much as I used to. Probably because I don't live with my brothers and stuff anymore, or I don't have roommates.
I just don't have time.
Yeah, and time. But it's just it's... The game, I don't find it. We're not going to...
I mean, it's the same game every year.
But the point being, so the Eagles, I believe, had the highest rated roster in the league on Madden.
Which is crazy to me because some of these ratings were super
I know some
low.
of the guys were low, but they also had probably the most 90 ranked guys because they had Jason Kelsey, Fletcher Cox, Zack Ertz, also Lane Johnson.
There's a few 89.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Brandon Brooks was. He was pretty high. They had a lot of guys who were high 80s, 90s, which I mean they've had this elite talent at the top level. All those guys you just listed have been on the team for a while, which is crazy to think about. But some of the weirder rating ones, Carson Wentz was 82. I think they changed the rating system or something because he was on par with some guys that he maybe should be, I guess, but that seemed a little low. I know Nate Sudfeld hasn't proven anything, but he was 57 or something like that, which is a little insane.
What was that?
And Andre Dillard's at 70, where Josh Perkins and Will Tye are ranked better than him.
Well,
I know he's a rookie, but come on.
There's a who's who behind Will Tye. Isaac Seumalo's behind Will Tye. Rasul Douglas.
Whoever made that game is in the Tye family. Is the rumor I heard.
They went to Stony Brook with the kid or something. I don't know, but I thought that was weird. The most egregious of the ratings, in my opinion, was Jordan Howard. Jordan Howard was the
like 30-something. It was like 36th, yeah.
Yeah, he was the 36th ranked
and he's the
running
most.
back.
He's the third most productive running back in the NFL the last 3 years.
Like,
whatever you think of him, that's
even production
crazy,
aside, he's a better blocker. I mean, his production is like he was ranked behind Frank Gore, Jerick McKinnon, and Dion Lewis,
guys who are either grandpas or didn't play last year.
He's been exponentially more productive. So I just thought that was really interesting. And I was just kind of like, huh? I mean, the Sudfeld thing's weird. And we'll get into
They probably just don't know who he is what I think.
We'll get into Sudfeld a little bit more later in the show. But egregious.
All right, enough Madden talk. I know you guys came here for our video game reviews. But so we're going to, for this episode and our next one, we're going to do a little training camp preview. We're going to do offense and defense. We're going to start with offense today. We kind of broke it down into categories: questions, concerns, and comments. And I'm going to ask Mike a question. We're going to go over some of our concerns or a concern with that position, and then anything else, the floor is yours for comment. You got it?
Sweet.
You paying attention?
See, I get the best job because I get to hear myself talk and give analysis, and then I don't have to think of questions. It's great. This relationship works.
All right, so we're going to start with quarterback position. Some might say it's the most important position in sports. You ever heard that?
Yeah.
All right, I'm not going to do like the obvious, can Carson Wentz stay healthy? Because that's not an answerable question. My question would be, and this kind of almost ties into the Madden thing, has Carson Wentz almost become underrated at this point?
I think he's been overlooked.
That's probably the right way.
Yeah,
I don't. Because there are still analysts who are like, he's the MVP this year, but I still see a lot where it's like, he's like the 15th best quarterback. Like, he's not a top 5 quarterback, and you can't say he's top 5 now. I get that, but you also can't say he's the 15th. He's in between there.
Yeah, I think analysts overthink the injury issue,
yes,
especially from like the outside. Like if you're out, it's what
to do with skills.
I mean, it's a "what have you done for me lately" league. That's fair. I even wrote in my Madden, crazy rating thing that I thought the 82 rating was somewhat valid. Who he was behind was not what was
relative
valid.
To the other guys. It wasn't. Was the
right?
problem,
Exactly. Like
Matt Ryan was 89, and I don't think Matt Ryan is 6 rating points better than Carson Wentz.
Right. I think so. My big qualms with the rating system were he was behind Ben Roethlisberger and Deshaun Watson, and I just thought, why? Oh no, Cam Newton. He was behind Cam Newton. Cam Newton's been equally injured.
They should be on the same level. Yeah.
Right. I think those 3 guys are on the same level. I think they're all top 12 quarterbacks.
And like Marcus Mariota's right behind him, which no.
Yeah. As much as some Philadelphia Eagles fans from the Chip Kelly era. Still
he's one of the once and future Eagles franchise.
But to answer your question, I think he's been overlooked. He hasn't been underrated, but overlooked is an issue. And I actually think it's something that plays into, I'm not a bulletin board guy. I don't think that has a lot to do with what happens in the Eagles locker room, but I do think if other teams in the league share the same outlook that a lot of outside analysts, have, teams are going to be in trouble. Because Carson looked good. He looked like himself. Last year, he didn't look like himself.
And he still had good
impressive numbers.
Yeah.
So, is there pressure on him to succeed because he's got all these great weapons around him, blah, 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 blah. Carson's being overlooked, and that's a problem for the league. Because if he's playing at the level that he did in 2017... this team's going to be very, very good.
One of the annoying parts about the Carson Wentz discussion is how quickly it's like he has to prove he can stay healthy. No, you don't prove you can stay healthy. Your body decides whether you're going to stay healthy or not.
Right.
If he's staying in shape and he's treating his body right, which by all indications he's really committed to like the Tom Brady style diet and workout and all that stuff, then I don't think you don't worry about the health until something happens. You don't worry about it beforehand.
Is he too thin though? That's something that I've
interesting question.
That's what I've noticed. I mean, because if he's going to be that thin, can he take those hits?
Will he be the runner he was in 2017, or will he be hesitant like he was last year?
Right. That's my one concern because we haven't seen him go against pads. I mean, he can't get hit in practice anyway. Yeah. You won't know till the preseason. But he looks fluid in the pocket. Like he's got his mobility back. There's no question about that. It's a matter of if he's got a guy that's had durability concerns and he's losing weight, is he losing the bulk that could maybe protect him if he's taking those hits? There's no way for either one of us to.
Yeah, that's the thing. We're just like saying like, okay, maybe that could.
But I think that's a fair question to ask.
Yeah. And we haven't seen him in a month either, to be fair.
Yeah.
All right, well, we kind of touched a little on concern, but concern that comes to mind right away is Nate Sudfeld ready when called upon? And as we stand here right now, I don't think so. And he has to show quite a bit in the preseason for me to think he's ready. I think, again, I'm not someone who's concerned about the injuries with Carson Wentz, but I am concerned about in a hypothetical scenario where Carson Wentz goes down and you're relying on Sudfeld to take on the offense. I know they have a lot around him. They have a good offensive line. They should have a better running game. But as it sits here right now, it's problematic where they stand with the backup quarterback position.
I think there's an A and B to your question. Not to copy edit your question, but there's A, is he ready to fill a Nick Foles style role as a backup? And B, are you comfortable knowing like you have a run of the mill backup, which probably 25 of the 32 teams have. You know what I mean?
Eagles are spoiled for sure.
Right. The Eagles have been spoiled the last 2 years. I think if you said, is he ready to step into a Nick Foles type role where you feel like if Carson Wentz went down for the season, you're still going to
lead you to a Super Bowl, yeah.
I mean, in fairness, in 2017, a lot of people thought the season was over when Nick Foles...
Well, Nick Foles at least had been a starting quarterback, had success, all that stuff. Like, you knew who Nick Foles was.
Right. Could he win a few games? I don't know about that with Nate Sudfeld. Now, if you said, like, I mean, last year, for a couple of years, Matt Stafford's backup was Kellen Moore.
Or like Peyton Manning was Jim Sorgi or whatever.
Right. So, like, again, I mean, Curtis Painter, too.
I mean, it's not a problem if your quarterback just stays healthy, which most quarterbacks do.
Right. So, what I would say is, I think it's like a weird scale because, you know, you look at the situation Nick Foles is going to, his backup's Gardner Minshew. Like, I mean, again...
Who's not Nick Foles.
Right. Again, cool development quarterback, awesome. The city of Jacksonville loves him. But again, you haven't really seen him do anything. And I think with Nate, he's been up and down in the preseason. As much as people, you know, gush over some of his preseason throws, he also threw quite a few interceptions. Yeah. Like, he wasn't perfect. The touchdown that he has thrown in the regular season was pretty much all Nelson Aguilar.
And it didn't matter either.
Right. He did play in a game against the Cowboys starters and didn't lead any scoring drives.
It was just short passes all game, yeah.
Right. So, again, like, can he play in the NFL? Sure. Can he win the NFL? That's another question. You know, Nick Foles, to me, what was more impressive by him is what he did last year as opposed to the Super Bowl year was don't get that twisted, but he literally came in and saved that season last year. And I don't think Nate Sudfeld, if he's entering in at a 6-7 standpoint, if this team has a shot of going 9-7. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, is there concern? Sure, but the Eagles have also been. I mean, most teams, if they lose Matt Stafford, if they lose Cam Newton, if they
you're
lose,
in trouble anyway.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, in a perfect world, the quarterback only sees the field in a blowout. Like,
right.
Which is what it would have been in 2017 if Wentz didn't tear his ACL on a freak thing. You got any last comments about I think we covered, I mean, unless you want to talk about Clayton Thorson.
Yeah, I do want to talk about Clayton Thorson.
All right, what do you got?
So, I think his offseason program performance was a little polarizing. I saw people that said, oh, well, he showed flashes. Or I saw people that said that he was just terrible.
I was more on the second hand.
Yeah. I think this was a rough introduction to the NFL. Yeah. He seemed to process things slowly. Every single time his first or second read wasn't there, he wanted to run with the ball. Like, that's not uncommon for a backup quarterback who doesn't get a lot of reps.
Yeah, and in his first 2 weeks in the NFL, yeah.
But if you think Nate Sudfeld, like, unless they bring in someone, there is absolutely no way Nate Sudfeld is not the number 2 quarterback.
Yeah.
And that's a concern to me because you're essentially not challenging Nate Sudfeld. If you're hoping that Cody Kessler and Clayton Thorson can push him, you're wrong. There's things that I like about Cody Kessler's game, but he has just not looked the part. And maybe that's coming in late. I don't know. But he is the longest of long shots now that Devin Ross is not on the roster. And Clayton Thorson, he's going to have to prove himself. You know, they seem to have drafted him to be the heir apparent for Nate Sudfeld, the backup of the long-term future. He needs to show it. Like, I mean, he needs to show it in the preseason. This is a guy who has a lot of college experience. Granted, the NFL is significantly different than college. But they drafted him for his intangibles. His size, his strength, his arm strength, and his, background. he's not like a high potential guy. Like, that's not what he is. He's a guy that can come in and do the job. And I think you've got to see him be able to respond immediately and show that maturity on the field. It's great if he has the maturity in the locker room and in the film room. Doesn't matter if it's not on the field.
If he's bad in the preseason, it's going to pretty much dictate whether he's with the Eagles beyond this season, even if he makes it through this season with them.
Yeah,
if he's really bad in the preseason, like if he looks like he did in practice, in games, they're going to have to consider cutting him.
Yeah, I think he's a Pumphrey guy, right? Pumphrey was the guy that they drafted to be the heir apparent to Darren Sproles. Wanted to see some stuff from him. He got put on IR, which I think is a good possibility for Thorson if he has a boo-boo. And then the next year, he was gone, pretty much. I mean, they brought him back on the practice squad later on, but, I mean, he's the quarterback version of Pumphrey to me.
Which isn't a ringing endorsement.
No, not really.
All right, let's go to running back, it's one of the more interesting. I mean, they had a pretty interesting one going into 2017, too, but this is a younger group. The question I have is, are people being a little overzealous with expectations for Miles Sanders? I've seen a lot of people say I think even just based on like which don't matter, fantasy football ranks and have him clearly ahead of Jordan Howard, which I think is crazy to me.
Yeah, I think nationally, yes, they are extremely.
It seems like I still think it's until he actually steps. You can't just assume he's going to be the number one running back by the end of the year until we actually see him on the field.
I mean, I've gotten into Twitter arguments. I can speak. I've gotten into Twitter arguments. Yeah, I can't read though. I've gotten into Twitter arguments with fantasy football people. I'm like, I'm there. I see what's going on. Yeah. Like, I listen.
He didn't practice at all during minicamp or OTAs, by the way.
Well, it wasn't even that. Like, Deuce and historically, under Doug Peterson,
there's no running back one.
Right. They've used a rotation. That said, your early down guy is going to be Jordan Howard.
Yes.
For one, Miles Sanders, as good as he was in that 1 year in college, not a proficient blocker, not a proficient receiver. I was really surprised by how cleanly Jordan Howard caught the ball during the offseason program. Is he a dependable receiver yet? Absolutely not. Corey Clement will be that guy if he's healthy. But I don't think that Miles Sanders, everybody's talking about Miles Sanders getting 800 or 900 yards. The rookie record is 650 yards by LaShawn McCoy, right?
Oh, you mean with the Eagles?
Yeah, for rushing. I just don't see how...
Josh Adams led the team with 500 last year.
Right, I don't think there's going to be a situation where there's this 1,000-yard rusher on this team. And I also don't think Miles Sanders is going to be a guy who's getting regular dominant touches until the second half of the season at best.
Yeah. I don't know, I just think he's a guy that, again, he didn't practice at all during the minicamp, which Deuce even said is a big deal. Just getting acclimated to the offense. He only was a starter for one season at Penn State. And I just think rookie running backs, while there have been some cases recently of guys coming in and just blowing the top off, I just don't see it on this team that maybe if Jordan Howard gets hurt, he steps in, but I still think Corey Clement might even be the one they turn to first, depending on when it would happen, I guess.
Well, and I don't think they really need him to be that guy.
No, they don't.
That's the thing.
I'm just saying the expectation of him being that guy, if not even in year two, I think that's still a little overzealous.
And this team really likes Corey Clement, a lot. And so, like you said, I think he'd be the first guy they turn to, especially in the first half of the season if something happened to Jordan Howard. But also, let's remember, Jordan Howard's extremely durable, too. So, I mean, you want to start off on the right foot. You want to get Carson in a rhythm. You want to do all these things. So, you're going to want to put your right foot forward, and Jordan Howard's a guy who's proven. And I think that's how you have to look at it in those first 8 games.
All right, so my concern I have going into training camp is that they don't have a proven pass-catching running back as of right now. I think Clement's shown flashes, obviously, in the Super Bowl, but even if you just look at his career numbers, he only has 32 career catches. He averaged less than 10 yards per catch last year. He got a decent amount of catches when he did play, still only 2 per game. They don't have Sproles around anymore. Boston Scott seems to be a guy they like. If you're actually playing Boston Scott, I think that's probably an issue. So that would be. I think Clement has the potential to be that guy, but as it sits here right now, they don't have a proven pass catcher on their roster at running back.
So let's get into some good radio. I completely disagree with you. I think Clement is a proven.
He's not done it over the course of a season. He did it in one game.
No, I mean, he had that incredible... probably the best...
Having a couple highlight catches doesn't make you a proven pass catcher.
But, I mean, he's
never been the dominant pass-catching running back out of a rotation.
Right, but he's also played, like what? Including the playoffs, like 25 games?
He's played 27 games.
Okay, so 27 games.
Oh, including the playoffs, it's 30 games.
Okay, so he's played 30 games. I mean, I think...
And he's had one breakout pass-catching performance in the Super Bowl.
Pretty important.
I understand. That doesn't make him a proven guy, though.
But, I mean, he's
shown talent, but he hasn't proven that he can be the dominant pass catcher.
But it's the Nick Foles, Nate Sudfeld thing. Like, compared to the rest of the league, like, a lot of running backs don't catch a ton of passes. It's not like especially from a rotational standpoint, if he's rotating in. He also had a terrible year last year, so...
Well, exactly.
But it was also injury plagued. So I would say by NFL standards, he is a proven receiving threat. Is he a dominant receiving threat? No.
I guess we disagree with something.
Yeah,
that's good.
There you go. I mean, hey.
Our boss is always telling us to disagree more. So.
I think Clement is your receiving guy out of the backfield, or at least your top receiving guy out of the backfield.
That's fair. You got any other concerns?
So... my concern is more, are they going to trust Miles Sanders to be in there on third down? Because if they're not, that's a big issue.
Yeah.
One, he's not a proven wide receiver.
Yeah.
I mean, out of the backfield.
No, they want him to be that, I think. But
yeah, a proven receiver, I should say. He wouldn't be a wide receiver anyway.
Well, he's not a proven wide receiver either.
And he's not a proven blocker. And so you wonder where... he's going to really be in the game because...
yeah, because you want Jordan Howard in on the short yardage stuff.
And early downs. And in the red zone. And so it's like, Miles?
How many snaps are left over, yeah.
Are you just using him in between the 20s? Like, what's your role for him? And I think you only, as a running back, the running back position I think is really unique, and I've talked to a lot of running backs about this. You have to find a rhythm. You have to get consistent touches. And I think part of the reason why Josh Adams had that run of really good games is because he was learning by doing. And so Miles Sanders is behind a guy like Jordan Howard who can get the job done. How much do you weigh development versus immediate success and all that stuff? So I'm interested to see how Deuce handles that because I think Miles Sanders is the biggest assignment he's had in his career.
It's the first time he's getting a chance to develop a guy from the beginning that they have plans for. Because I don't know if Josh Adams, they ever intended him to be what he was.
Right, or Corey Clement. Yeah.
So that ties into my comment before we end on running backs is we don't know how he's going to look at training camp, but I get the feeling that Josh Adams is going to be an odd man out.
Yeah.
By the end of training camp, and I think that's the wrong decision. I know you might have both been talking about how we're higher on Josh Adams, and it seems like the team even is. I know he's a weird player considering he's a big running back, but he doesn't play like a goal line back like you'd expect. But he's really athletic, and he got more big plays than any running back they had last year, and he got him at the level of a LeGarrette Blount from the year before. They don't really have a big play guy out of this group. Mm-hmm. Which I know Clement can get those long passes that are amazing, but in terms of running the ball, they don't really. Josh Adams is that guy. Wendell Smallwood has proven time and time again he can get you a few yards, he can get a few catches. He's pretty blah, but they're never going to get rid of him because they love him so much. And Boston Scott, again, if he's playing, then you're probably in trouble. Donald Pumphrey's not making the team. But I just think Josh Adams, they should invest in developing him as a potential pairing with Miles Sanders down the line. I don't know if he'll get claimed if they cut him. Maybe they can keep him around in the practice squad because of his injury issues. But I don't know. It just seems weird to me that they've moved on from him already. It seems like.
Well, so a couple of things. So the uphill battle for him is the intangibles of the other two guys, right? Boston Scott can be a returner. Wendell Smallwood has played a lot of special teams. He can catch the ball when asked. He's not that great of a blocker, but Josh Adams isn't either. No. And Josh Adams is coming off of shoulder surgery. So it's partially why he's kind of been on the back burner a little bit. There are a lot of people that were frustrated by his short yardage ability. There are running backs that are not good in short yardage.
Yeah, the Eagles kept giving it to him in this situation. It's clearly not his skill set. I don't think that's his fault.
And that's also part of the reason why I'm concerned about their usage of Miles Sanders. Because if Miles Sanders is in the game, he's probably running the ball. Yeah. You know what I mean? Early on in his career. Like, maybe they throw it to him every now and then, but when Josh Adams was in the game, you knew it was going to Josh Adams because he couldn't block.
And he wasn't a pass catcher either.
Right, so that's a concern. He just needs to show development. I mean, I think
right.
Talent-wise, I think he's better than...
Yeah, that's my thing. It's just, like, develop the talent. They tend to, like, give up on these guys. Not the Eagles, I'm saying in general. It seems like teams give up on guys too quickly.
He does seem like to be... like the top candidate for a player-for-player trade, I think, on this roster, right?
He'd be appealing to somebody. The Jets, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, because I do think he was a find. I mean, granted, he was one of the bigger name, undrafted free agents at the time, but I think he's a guy that does have potential. He can play in the league. I agree with you. I think it's a little unfortunate that he's received so much, negative fanfare and a lot of, pessimism during this offseason, but he's a guy that I think can play, and if he has a good preseason performance, you have to keep him over Wendell. Because when you know what Wendell is, Josh Adams is still developing.
Yeah.
You've had 3...
There's still like a ceiling that can be reached, whereas Smallwood has reached his ceiling.
The whole West Virginia group is perplexing to me, but anyway.
Well, it might start dwindling over the next year or two,
I would say, yeah.
All right, we can move on to receiver, which is an interesting group. Question I have is, do you think it's realistic to think that J.J. Arcega-Whiteside can overtake Aguilar's role by the end of the season? Or at least like his place in the pecking order, I should say, because he won't be a slot receiver probably. But
yeah, I mean, I think he can play in the slot.
I look at how little it seemed they were confident in Aguilar last year based on the way they traded for Tate and then kind of shelved him. And his role just like went downhill. And then they added Arcega-Whiteside. They added Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders. Dallas Goedert is going to play more. Like, I just don't see how Nelson Aguilar gets touches this year. Like, I just don't see it. I know maybe the quarterbacks like him more than the coaches do. Who knows? I mean, he was a big part of that Super Bowl run. I just don't see how he fits into this. Like, they're going to go 12 personnel a lot.
Yeah.
It's like a weird spot for him. He's obviously making good money this year, which is great for him. But he's going to be a free agent after this year, and if he doesn't put up the numbers, then he's not going to get the kind of money he's looking for.
I'm surprised they didn't trade him.
Yeah, I mean, they still can, of course.
They can.
They traded Jordan Matthews in August, remember?
Yeah, but now he's, now he's coming off an off-season program injury. Look, I think J.J. was a guy that they needed to figure out before they traded Nelson, if I'm them internally.
Yeah, they want to see if he's ready, kind of thing. Kind of like how with Carson Wentz his rookie year.
I could see Nelson getting traded, but if you're going to trade Nelson, you got to put him in bubble wrap for the preseason. You can't really...
Yeah. I mean, if they don't play him in preseason, maybe that'll be a point to something.
I agree with you completely. The Golden Tate was a slight against him.
Yeah, I think pretty clearly. If you just look at the way the snaps went after that.
$9.4 million is a lot, but then you're also thinking, like, do you really need it during the season? It's not like you're going to sign anybody for like a big deal. That said, though, his role could be very minimal, and you've got to figure out what you want to do with JJ, who... in my opinion, is a long-term heir apparent to Alshon Jeffrey. Yeah. So, yeah, I think he could realistically bite into his snaps and his playing time, which, again, isn't a bad problem to have, especially when he's going to replace him anyway, probably long-term as the number 3 or number 1 even wide receiver. Yeah, I mean, I think Nelson gets traded by the trade deadline. I think you have to get something for him now. It's great to get compensatory picks, but I don't know how much of a compensatory pick you're going to get for him if his role is so...
And that's the thing, like, the fact that they're keeping him here is going to make his role lesser to the point where he's not going to get you a 4th-round pick.
And he's a guy, too, if you have a major... Maybe he's, like, the card up their sleeve if they have a major injury and they can player swap him for, an offensive tackle.
Are you saying if another team has a major injury, you're saying?
No.
Oh, you're saying, like, if a tackle got hurt on the Eagles. Yeah.
Right, like, let's say... Here, let me throw
Jason Kelce got hurt.
Yeah, let's throw... no, that's a good one. So Jason Kelce got hurt. Team has 2 really good centers. You trade Alshon and... Or, sorry, Alshon.
You trade Alshon for a center.
You trade Nelson Aguilar.
You heard it here first. Mike wants to trade Alshon for a backup center.
You trade Nelson for a 5th-round pick and a backup center. Something like that.
Yeah.
But again, it's a very awkward situation that I think they have brewing.
Yeah. I don't really have... crazy, concern would be if Aguilar's okay with having a lesser role or if he takes that publicly. I don't think he would. But, I mean, the one you could say is that their top 2 receivers are pretty injury-prone in their careers, Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson. Mm-hmm. Alshon missed 3 games last year. He played all of the year before, obviously, with the torn shoulder, and then his career with the Bears was littered with injuries. Deshaun hasn't played a full year, I forget, since, 2014 or something like that. Mm-hmm. So if, both of them get hurt, who's stepping in? Who's stepping in for Deshaun? Then, again, they don't have the speed guy again, and, well, that would be my concern. But this is maybe the best receiver group in the NFL, or at least one of them.
Yeah, I mean, that is the concern, because your offense completely changes, right? So it was just like when they lost J.H.I., their offense changed. When they lost Aaron Sproles a couple of years ago, their offense somewhat changed. And that's why Nelson's important. I agree with you. I think there is a concern with that injury history, and Nelson's proven that he's got dependable hands and can get the job done. So you've got to balance that out. But yeah, I mean, none of these guys that are competing for the 5th job could replace any of these guys, any of the 4, really. Mm-hmm. They don't have a clear-cut backup slot receiver. They don't have a clear-cut burner. Marken Mitchell's interesting. Yeah. Or Marken Michel, sorry.
Yeah, it'll be a big training camp for him to see if he can keep that.
I mean, Charles Johnson's a guy they tried to, earmark for the first-team offense when everybody was out. He was okay.
Didn't really show that much, yeah.
So, again, Nelson's in such a weird spot. If I were Nelson, I wouldn't want to be here, because I know my role's going to be minimalized.
Maybe he doesn't want to be here. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to put words in his mouth.
I'm saying maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. He's not going to tell us that.
Right, but
he's smart. He knows his role is not going to be what he wants it to be this year.
Right, but then also, where is he going to go and be the number
one exactly. Where is he going to be that? Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting to see how that all develops, especially during preseason and training camp. I'm also concerned, let's say Nelson or Deshaun suffers an injury in training camp. What do you do? Yeah, it's the best, probably the top.
Does Howie make a trade for a speed guy at that point?
Right, and are you going to do that investment when you've invested in Deshaun and Alshon for the next couple of years?
You could try and buy low on a John Ross or something like that, I guess.
Right. I mean, now that's interesting to me, but he's also
swap Aguilar for him.
Yeah, well, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, there you go. Interesting guy over here.
But from a wide receiver perspective, the guy that I'm most intrigued by is DeAndre Tompkins, but we haven't really seen anything from him yet.
He didn't really play them. So I am intrigued by the number 5 receiver battle. Mm-hmm. Because you have Mac Hollins, who he's alive. We saw him alive and starting to get back to practicing. They were high on him, so we'll see. I mean, they have Shelton Gibson still. They have Marken Michel. They have DeAndre Tompkins. They have Charles Johnson, Braxton Miller. He's probably not really in the mix, but those are 6 guys competing for basically 1, maybe 2 jobs if they kept 6 receivers, and they all have different skill sets, which makes it pretty interesting. And I'm knowing how he'll probably add a veteran guy in the next week or 2, like he did last year.
Who do you think, as it stands now, who do you think is the guy?
Probably still Mac Hollins.
Yeah, I mean, I think you
have to lean that way until somebody takes the job from him, pretty much. I don't think it's he has an iron grip on it, and it was only minicamp, but if Michelle plays like he did in minicamp, then he's a legit, you have to think about him more.
Yeah, I think DeAndre Tompkins, and Charles Johnson are the guys.
The best competition.
I think this is it for Shelton Gibson.
Yeah, unless they really like him as a gunner, but...
I mean, there are guys
if he can't beat out Marken Michel and DeAndre Tompkins, then he shouldn't be on this team anyway.
Well, and the thing is, too, is people talk about how great of a gunner he is. There are wide receivers that come in week 8 and just their role's a gunner. I mean, that's life in the NFL. You have special teams guys that come in and out. You can't always be blessed with the situation that the Patriots have, where they have a guy that they just pay to be a gunner, and he's incredible, and that's his job, So
yeah,
it happens in the league.
And the Eagles have a roster crunch this year. Their rosters, it's a good problem to have, obviously, but the roster's so good that you have to decide where to keep the extra man. And I don't know if there's an obvious spot where you do that if you're not sacrificing somewhere else.
For sure.
Yeah, especially because they have so many offensive linemen. How many of them are they going to keep? Blah, blah, blah. All right, so we can jump over to tight end. This is the best tight end group in the NFL.
Not even close.
I don't have a concern. We're going to skip the concern part here. But the question I have is, what is a reasonable expectation for Dallas Goedert this year? So last year, his final stats were 33 catches, 44 targets, 334 yards, 4 touchdowns. my expectation is that those numbers go up. How much will be the question, because how much is there even available for him to get? But if they follow through and go 12 personnel more often, the touchdowns in particular is the number I'm looking at to rise. Maybe he won't get 100 yards per game, but if he can get 6 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns as the number 2 tight end, like I've been doing a countdown to the most important guys. I forget where he came in. It was in the teens. But I think by the end of the year, we're going to view him nationally. He's going to be viewed as one of the 10 best tight ends in the NFL. Yeah, I think he has that kind of talent at least.
Yeah, I mean...
And maybe that's not a reasonable expectation. I don't know.
No, I mean, I could see him going for, like, 45 catches for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think that's reasonable.
That's a good year for your number 2 tight end.
Yeah, I mean, you know...
Interestingly, Mike Groh called him a starter when he was talking about him earlier this offseason.
Because he is. I mean, like, that's really what he is. I mean, their base is probably going to be 2 tight ends, if I had to guess.
I mean, he's a good blocker. He became a good blocker. He's a better blocker than Ertz. Like, you should have him on the field.
So, my question is...
You don't want to question me. That's not how this game works.
So, now that we've touched on running back, tight end, and wide receiver, what position do they keep the guy for? Do they keep 4 tight ends?
So the base number is they would have 4 running backs, 5 receivers, 3 tight ends, right? So who would have which position would have the extra one?
Yeah, who would have the 5? Would it be the 5th running back, the 6th wide receiver, or the 4th tight end?
That's a good question.
To me,
I don't think running back. I think it'll be receiver or tight end.
So for me, I think it's Josh Perkins. Because you saw last year they could line him out at wide receiver.
He's basically a receiver who's tight end's body. Yeah.
He's the guy, to me, that I find intriguing, especially if you're going to run 12 personnel a lot. You can't just have 3 players at tight end.
Yeah, then you kind of need an extra backup if that's the dominant formation.
Right, especially if you're going to go to 13 personnel at times, because...
Unless they view Arcega-Whiteside as almost a hybrid type of guy, but...
Hardcore mistake if that's their outlook. But, yeah, I mean, you know, he's a guy that can be moved around, and I think he makes sense. I think he justifies you keeping more tight ends and because he can play wide receiver in a pinch. Running back, I know you have a rotation, but chances are if you're keeping 4 running backs, you're keeping a guy like Howard, Clement, and
Smallwood.
Clement, Smallwood,
Sanders,
and Sanders, and all 3 of those guys can do everything to some extent.
Yeah.
So I think you're fine. I mean, you can pick somebody up off the waiver wire in week 4 if you need to. But, yeah, I'm leaning towards keeping a 4th tight end.
All right. So, offensive line. I guess how concerned, this kind of ties into concern and question, but I think it's the biggest preseason, is how concerned are you about right guard as we enter training camp?
Not really, because it seems like Brandon Brooks is starting to make some legitimate progress. He went and worked out with our buddy Duke Manyweather.
Was he at the Masterminds?
Yeah, he was at the Masterminds. He's the guy that's been training very, very hard. He's one of those guys that's kind of come back full force. And I think, you know, you look at the progress that, like, somebody like Ronald Darby's made where he was already cutting and you know, doing comebacks for interception drills and ball skill drills. I'm starting to feel good about Brandon Brooks. That said, Big V needs to show that what he can do in pads before we can be like, yeah, well, exactly. If Brooks can miss 2 games, like, are we going to feel comfortable about this?
Because I think... In theory, Vaitai as a guard makes sense, but he's still Vaitai, who looked really bad last year. Like, just because you moved him to a different position doesn't make him better than he is.
Right.
So, then you have a guy like Matt Pryor, who they seem to like. You have, who else? You have Wisniewski, who...
I don't know if they like Matt Pryor. I mean,
we'll find out, I guess. But.
Yeah, I mean, he really hasn't done it. I mean, to immediately go to Big V.
He has a lot to prove. He's on the bubble. Mm-hmm. But that's the point. So Wisniewski would be the vet. But I think they almost prefer him just be the backup center, honestly. Mm-hmm. Maybe Sam All as backup. So, like, Brooks has been one of the most consistent offensive linemen in the NFL. And another question would be if he comes back from the Achilles, the same player he was before, because that's a tough injury no matter what position you are. Although Jason Peters came back from it when he was the same age, actually, funnily enough, when he was 30.
And he tore it twice.
Yeah, and he missed the whole year because he did it like during the offseason, I think, is when he suffered the injury. And then he came back and still made the All-Pro team like 3
Yeah, what happened was he suffered it early, and then he re-tore it later in the offseason.
Okay. That's tough. I mean, that dude's been. I mean, okay, let's talk about Jason Peters.
Okay.
Because I mean, we know Kelsey. We know what you have in Lane Johnson. You even know what you have in Segamalo to an extent. But Peters, Jeff Stoutland insisted when we talked to him that he's going to be better this year. He's more than a full year removed from his ACL injury. Last year, he suffered all these nicks and bruises, and maybe it was more serious than that. He technically played all 16 games, but he didn't finish 4 of them. And I believe he left the Saints playoff game early. Even Jason Peters at not his best, he still was a league average left tackle. You can survive if he. You kind of need him to be a little better than he was last year, but you can survive if he's only like he was last year, because that's still better than Vitae at left tackle and probably better than Dillard as a rookie.
Yeah, I agree. I think they did the right thing.
Bringing him back, you mean?
Yeah, bringing him back on that 1-year deal. It's his swan song. He deserves to retire here
on his own terms.
His own terms. I mean, he's really important in the locker room, really important at teaching one-on-one, as we saw with Andre Dillard. And the biggest thing was they identified his heir apparent. So no matter what,
finally, yeah.
And I think they're doing the right thing by making Dillard just learn left tackle.
Yeah,
that's really smart.
They cross train everybody, but he's not
right. To me, the question isn't about Peters. It's similar to the Nate Sudfeld, Carson Wentz scenario. Are you comfortable with Andre Dillard if Jason Peters has to miss half of week 1?
I'd put money on the fact that Peters isn't going to finish every game.
Right, but let's see in the first 3 weeks.
Yeah. Are you confident in playing within the first 3 weeks if he has to?
Realistically, let's say Brooks kind of pulls an Alshon Jeffrey where he can't play the first 2 games of the season. So you're lining up Big V at right guard. So it's not like you're going to move him over to play left tackle just in case.
Yeah, so then you have to play Dillard at that point.
You have to play Dillard there.
Because you're not playing Mailata.
Right.
Who's kind of been right tackle exclusively.
Right. So again, do you feel comfortable? Because remember, let's say week 1, he has to miss the whole fourth quarter because somebody steps on his foot. Do you feel comfortable there? Because that's the question that the Eagles and Jeff Stoutland and all those guys have to ask themselves. I think Andre Dillard's a really good prospect. I think he was a great pickup for them. I do think he can run block. But he didn't run block at Washington State, so he's getting thrown into the fire. It's all projection, right? Yeah. So you have to feel like you can project him to play week 1. That's my biggest question on this entire offense. Do you feel like Andre Dillard, we're going to have to find out in training camp in the preseason? Jordan Mailata, again, really interesting prospect. Do you feel good if Lane Johnson goes down right away, especially because you're only training Dillard at left tackle? While that's a smart move, you also don't have a veteran tackle behind it. You don't have veteran tackles behind either one of these guys. These former All-Pros. That's concerning. You know what I mean? That's why I question whether Mailata really has a strong shot at making this roster or even getting playing time, because you're essentially in this spot where neither one of these guys have played an NFL game. Mailata's never played a meaningful game, period. A game in general, yeah. You want to talk about drop-offs between Carson Wentz and Nate Sudfeld, or drop-offs between, Alshon Jeffrey and Charles Johnson. Good Lord.
Lane Johnson to Mailata.
The best right tackle in football and a future Hall of Famer for a first-round pick who never had to do run blocking.
And a guy who never held a football until a year ago.
Right. That, to me, is extremely concerning. But then again, they really don't have other left. Everybody keeps talking about how they have such a great situation at tackle. They have a great long-term outlook. Yeah. I don't think they have a very good left tackle depth chart unless Brandon Brooks is ready to go week 1 and you feel like
put Vitae back on that.
So, right, yeah. Because here's what's going to happen. If, let's say, Lane Johnson goes down, right? You're going to move V to right tackle.
Of course.
Probably, yeah.
And start Wiz, probably.
At right guard. So you've made yourself weaker at 2 spots.
Which they hate doing.
Which is what they hate doing. You're also creating an issue for Jason Kelsey. Wisniewski's played right guard maybe once, the Saints playoff game.
He's always a left guard.
Right, a left guard or a center.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, too. Let's say you have multiple injuries. You have Kelsey go down.
And Peters, yeah.
So what are you gonna do? Like, that's the problem. They don't have, like, a veteran guy. They've set themselves up good for the long term. And maybe that's, again, being spoiled, but dear Lord, the drop-off expectations. You just paid Carson Wentz a lot of money, and he's coming off back-to-back season-ending injury. It is a very big concern to me.
And I think most teams don't have a great backup center, to be fair.
Right, for sure.
But, Jason Kelce is a warrior, obviously, and he'll play even if his arm's falling off or something. But, if Jason Kelce goes down, I feel like they're in as much trouble as any player on the roster if they go down.
For sure.
You don't want to move Sam Allo over there. And Wisniewski, he hasn't played center in a while. Also,
yeah, I covered his last year as a center, and the reason why he was not re-signed is he had a lot of snapping issues.
Yeah.
So
it's not like you're going to play Anthony Fabiano there. I don't know what.
Yeah, well, he might be the guy that
he'll be on the practice squad probably. Yeah,
he could be a dark horse. I mean,
he's the dark horse roster guy. I think they have another Keegan Render is the undrafted rookie's name.
Yeah,
he's not going to make the team, but Fabiano's been in the system.
And he's actually played he's played 9 or 10 games in the league, so he knows what it's like.
I think didn't he go to Ivy League school or something too?
Yeah.
He's really smart.
Yeah, he went to Harvard.
One of those Ivy League schools.
Kind of the most famous one, I guess. Oh my God, we're going to get killed by the Princeton people.
All the Princeton people will listen to the No Huddle Show.
Yeah.
If you're from Princeton, you listen to the Huddle Show, comment on it.
Yeah.
Because I'd be blown away by that.
So
we're pretty smart. I get it.
Yeah, we're dropping your education level down. But yeah, to me, the lack of experience behind arguably two of the best tackles of the last 10 years is very concerning. Granted, you're not... there's going to be spots where you just don't have...
That's the thing. The reality is, you're not going to have a great backup at every position. No team has that. Mm-hmm. And it seems like that's the expectation. Sometimes we're all victims of this. Or guilty of this, should say, where we overanalyze the roster. But we're they don't have
our job.
They don't have a backup at this one position, even though you look at the whole roster. They're prepared almost everywhere if you think about it. But yeah, the offensive line, especially because of the age of all those guys, I think most of them are going to be 30 after this year, and all but pretty much all of them have had injury issues. If you think about, maybe not Sam Allo. Even he did. He missed a bunch of games last year.
Yeah, he had the pack. Yeah.
So Lane Johnson was banged up for a good chunk of the year, and he played some of his worst football, which he would probably admit. Jason Peters, we've talked about. Jason Kelce, we've talked about. Brandon Brooks usually hasn't been injured actually, but he has an Achilles he's coming off of. So that health is probably the biggest concern on the offensive line over any position, really.
Sure. Maybe quarterback. But yeah, sure. I agree with you. I think offensive line is something that's kind of gone under the radar because of the optimism of the future. But they don't have a guy. They're really spreading themselves thin because Big V, for all of his faults, was a proven swing tackle, and they're moving him to right guard. So you're almost cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Maybe they signed Chance Warmack. I don't know.
Yeah,
He's
maybe.
Still out there.
Hey, maybe there could be a chance.
There's 2 open roster spots. Hey, that's a good transition.
Yeah, Jonathan Cooper got signed the other day. Oh my God,
man! How many teams can he be bad for until they stop signing him?
I don't know.
He's one of those guys that we've talked about this in the past. The appeal for Chance Warmack is just that he has a bunch of starts on his resume. That doesn't mean they were good starts. He just has them.
Hey, he's got a better career than Jonathan Cooper.
So to that point, is he one of the 2 they sign with these 2 roster spots?
They have to sign a veteran lineman.
Yeah, and I was thinking offensive lineman and wide receiver. So which is pretty much what they do. But veteran guys, though.
I just don't know who you're signing at wide receiver.
I'll look at who's available right now.
Okay.
It would be a guy like a Marcus Wheaton, who there's a reason why nobody wanted him.
What about Kamar Aiken?
Got him off the street, right? He didn't like when you said that.
Yeah. So here, I'll give you, while he's looking that up, I'll give you a funny story. So, I was talking to Kamar Aiken. It was my first game covering the Eagles. I had just gotten... I covered...
in Tampa, right?
Yeah, it was in Tampa in week 2. I had covered the Jaguars game against the Giants in week 1. But, so I went up to him and I was like, hey, you started this game off the street, and he's like, I wasn't off the street, I was on my couch.
Took it literally.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I know, it's like a
it's an expression.
It's an expression, buddy. All right,
I got the list. All right,
it was a very serious conversation.
Pierre Garcon, Michael Crabtree. I don't think he would accept the role as the 5th guy. Terrence Williams, Seth Roberts is interesting. Mike Wallace. Martavis Bryant suspended, I believe.
Yes.
Brandon LaFell, Andre Holmes, DeAnthony Thomas.
You don't have a lot of speed there.
Bruce Ellington, Josh Huff.
Bruce Ellington, backup slot receiver.
Josh Huff.
Yeah, good luck.
Bring him back.
He's trying out for the XFL.
Kelvin Benjamin. Man, what a way his career faded.
Yeah.
My God.
There's not a lot of speed on this.
Sammy Coates. Michael Camperano.
Yeah, I like him.
It's a rough group. I mean, if Pierre Garçon just wanted to retire and get a ring or something, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, he's dealt with some head issues.
There's not even like Marcus Wheaton type guys here. I guess Marcus Wheaton. That's disrespecting him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like the guy that of that list that I would probably look at.
Seth Roberts.
Yeah, Seth Roberts probably.
Yeah. I mean, he's fine if you...
Wait, Seth Roberts... Are you looking at over the...
I was looking at Spotrac. Did he sign somebody?
Yeah, he plays for the Ravens.
Oh, the Ravens. Okay, so he's not an option.
Yeah,
so
Seth Roberts would have
had that idea, too. I mean, Terrence Williams, I guess, just take a Cowboys guy.
Man.
They always get a scrubby Cowboys guy at some point.
Yeah, but you don't want another Miles Austin situation.
That's what I'm saying. There's always a Miles Austin in there somewhere.
Or a Steve Smith. Every time they've done that, it's been like bad. Well, Steve Smith
that's what they need. They need to get a guy with the same name as a better receiver. That's what they need to do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of options. Maybe you make a deal with the Jets to trade for a bottom.
I mean, they found DeAndre Carter this time last year, so maybe they found DeAndre Carter. I mean, they didn't mean for him to be as good as he was, probably because they cut him, and then he's still with the Texans now. Actually, He's got another contract. All right, we can end on that note. We'll do a defensive one, if not later this week, then early next week, and then we'll be doing them throughout training camp. We'll be getting back into a routine of doing 1 to 2 to 3 a week. There'll be plenty to talk about during training camp. Hope you guys follow us. Read all of our content at NJ.com. Subscribe to the podcast. Leave a comment. Write a review. And thanks for listening, guys.